Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Stephen McCarthy from the McCarthy Project coming back to you live from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we are approximately 1 week from Christmas, and it is snowing and cold out in Minnesota. And we are going to be talking about beach volleyball, which is a much happier subject for sure. I should make fun of the weather in Minnesota, but it is fun that seasons change, but it also is very fun to be outside. And I'm just looking at a picture from our summer camps with the lake and behind the court and just out there. I remember just sitting out there in the sun enjoying the afternoon. So anyways, as I digress a little bit. But nonetheless, we're talking today about the subject of the NCAA announcing that next year they're going to have the first beach volleyball championship down in Alabama. And it is a great big step forward as far as I'm concerned, from Minnesota's perspective anyways, as we're starting to kind of gain some momentum in having, players, play the outdoor game, versus just playing the indoor game. And one of the things I'm going to have later on the show is we're going to have one of the original 15 coaches, Damian Elder from Mercer University, come on and talk about his perspective of, the announcement and how they've developed as a team over the 4 years that they've actually played the beach-only world down in the South. That we had taped the interview, and it was a great running joke to talk about the weather as far as that's concerned. But it's a fantastic interview. I think you'll get a lot out of it to realize that really there are a lot of differences. A lot of the same. And as this announcement comes, in a couple of years, the game will change. And at this point, there's a lot of opportunities. And one of the big things that I wanted to kind of get across, in at least to the Minnesota athletes that this might be listening to this, is there really are a lot of opportunities. And it doesn't need to be a really well, I'll believe that for the interview. He talks about in there what it takes from a young athlete's perspective to actually get recruited and to actually play beach volleyball in college. So I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to steal his thunder related to that. But I wanted to kind of give a little bit of context to the game and why I feel it's better than and you should play both, not just one or the other. That there really are I believe a lot of holistic advantages to playing outdoor versus playing indoor. Not to say that either one's better or worse than the other, but I think there is some advantages to playing essentially all positions and to be able to move and to be able to improvise and have to get over things quicker. We did interview Bailey Coleman from UAB a couple of weeks ago. Actually, now it's a couple of months ago. But she talked about the idea of just getting over a bad shot quicker. You can have a tendency on the indoor game to maybe hide for a couple points, as you kind of process through that. But with the beach game, there's only two of you. And if you don't kind of change that direction quickly, 4 or 5 points might go by and you'd be in a very difficult spot just because you were still mad about that one shot that you missed. So I think there is a lot of value, in playing the game and playing it, at a holistic level. On the other hand, I do see, I think Damian makes a great point related to a middle, doing 600 of these versus 3 of those, And is he really concerned about doing the three of those? You know what I mean? That type of thing. And I think I would agree with him on that for sure. But and then just looking at the number of schools, I think the next couple of years should be very interesting as more of the the larger schools hop on board. There is going to be a need for specialization, I'm sure, and we talk about that as well in that interview. In that there is going to be probably a choice that needs to be made if you're going to play indoor or beach, and so that has its good components, and then it also has some not so good components as it starts to become more of a club scenario versus something that you just do for fun in the summer. And hey, wasn't able to make it in the indoor thing, but I can really do this outdoor thing pretty good. So let's go see what we can do. And so I am not going to mix any more of my only thoughts, because I really think Damian did a tremendous job in the interview, just talking about all the different pieces. And I think he has a very unique perspective as well, as being one of the original 15 colleges that did provide beach as a sport, and has already been after it or doing or coaching for 4 years, in that capacity, and what he talks about the future, from a coach's perspective too. So without further ado, I am going to go to break quick, and then we'll come back and listen to the interview I did earlier today with Damian Elder from Mercer University. Well, we are back, and this is Stephen McCarthy from the McCarthy Project, and we have been talking about what changes might happen in the world of beach volleyball related to the NCAA adding a national championship. Now, there had been a previous, national championship through the Coaches Association, and so I think that's kind of how emerging sports kind of grow up a little bit. So I've asked Damian Elder from Mercer University, who has competed at the beach volleyball level for a while, at the collegiate level, to talk a little bit about, what does change with the NCAA recognizing it, and then also for young athletes and what the possibilities might be in the future. So how you doing, Damian?
Good. Thank you for having me on, Stephen. I appreciate it.
It is a fun time. I tell you, if there was ever a better job than I was going to make a joke talking trash about volleyball, what else could you ask for?
Well, yeah, some days that's true. Some days I could ask for a lot more, I think.
That's true. That's probably true. We could be a lot. I was going to make a joke about all the stuffed shirts and the cubicle guys, but, life doesn't work always that way. But anyways, we're talking about the subject of the NCAA announcing this year that they're going to have a national championship next year in May. Down in Alabama, and I just kind of want to get your thoughts on that piece. But before we go there, I've missed one piece. Would you kind of give us your background and kind of how you got involved with the world of beach volleyball and volleyball as a whole?
Sure. I guess the before college part isn't really as nearly as interesting, but I started my college coaching career at Stanford University. I was fortunate enough to have know the right people to get in at the top, essentially, and that was in 2004. And from there, I went to the University of South Carolina, and that was kind of the genesis of at least my involvement in coaching what at that time was sand volleyball. The SEC, I believe, was the first conference even to consider just having essentially just a throw your hat in spring tournament at the end for sand volleyball. And at South Carolina, we decided to go just to do it and have a couple weeks worth of practice. And I really took to it. And my head coach was kind enough to let me do all the training, as I had played it for a number of years, and not at the professional level, unfortunately. But and then from there, it was I had a sand camp. It might have been one of the first in the country to some success, and we were able to win the SEC championship in that moment. And from there, I went to College Charleston, who was one of the original 15 beach programs as well, and then just fortunate enough to be able to get the head coaching job here at Mercer in the moment that beach volleyball was starting. So I'm actually one of the original 15 schools and coaches, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I don't know how many are left now. I know at least there's 2 or 3 that have made it through the first 4 years of doing both. Back 4 years ago, it seems so long ago that I was and still am doing indoor and beach at the same time. So yeah, and now I'm here and on the verge of having it be an NC2A sport, which is really exciting.
And it really is. And it's funny because I didn't even think about it when I contacted you. I was thinking from the athlete perspective, but I'm wondering, as you look at the college game, it would change for you too, because I can imagine if you're the indoor coach and if the game takes off, that they may have to separate the job more often. I mean, because it seems like the majority of the coaches, the head coaches, do both, because it's a shorter season, or I don't exactly know the motives, but would you agree or disagree?
I hope that I agree. At some of the smaller schools, I suspect that even with the NC2A sponsoring it and making it, I don't know if legitimizing it is the right word, because we feel like, at least we've had a conference for 4 years, so it's felt legitimate over down here in the Southeast for all 4 years, but to the general public and to the world, the NC2A sponsoring it obviously makes some legitimacy out of it. But to get back to your question, I can't imagine that if it doesn't have to explode. It just has to get bigger and bigger by longer steps, maybe not leaps and bounds, but by the time that all the conferences have automatic qualifiers in 2 years, I have to imagine that all of the Power 5 at least, and any of the bigger schools will have to be separate for them to be able to compete for 2 championships, one for the indoor, one for the beach. Because if you combine, there's a little bit of dilution, at least at our level, maybe not at UCLA or Stanford's level, things like that. But I can't imagine that you're not going to have to separate it in a couple years.
And it's interesting because I think it is in the world as it spans, and we talked about this off air, is that we're in Minnesota, and to actually have, I can't even imagine, I don't even know the closest, team is still, I don't even know, it's probably 8-9 hours away, something like this.
Right.
It's really, there's nothing on the north side of the United States almost. And it just is an interesting position as it goes through. And when you would put that 2-year period in there, I'm sure it's going to have to somehow come north, because, like with the Division I Final Four going on in Omaha, I consider that the Midwest, that we got to have something up here for us from that
Absolutely.
standpoint. But anyways, let's get back to the perspective question. How does, because you're the part of the original 15, we'll call you, is how does this next step change your perspective in kind of, is it just the next step, or is it kind of, hey, this is a big announcement?
For us, and by us I mean I'm going to include the schools from the Atlantic Sun, because of the original 15, which is nice that you're in Minnesota. That's sort of a hockey term too, but
that's right. The Frozen Four, we're going to call you guys beach volleyball. Frozen Four.
Right. So we're, the Atlantic Sun, just to sort of blow our horn just a little bit, was the only conference. We have been the only conference, and 5 of the original 15 schools were here in the Atlantic Sun, including Mercer. And like I said previously, the legitimizing it is true. I think the NC2A making it a varsity sport definitely, from a perspective, is a big deal. But in small scale, for us who've been playing for 4 years, who've had a conference schedule for 4 years, who've had a conference championship for 4 years, who have had an automatic bid for 2 of those years to the coaches championship. We've done, all of our legwork and all of our sort of structure it's not a gigantic jump into the NC2A for us, because we've sort of felt like, not that we didn't know that the NC2A wasn't sponsoring it. It's just from us down here, it's always felt like we've been doing it in order to get ready to be NC2A eligible. So now it is just the next logical step for us. It's not a gigantic announcement from my coaching perspective in the Atlantic Sun.
Yeah, it's funny because I even think when I was putting together the notes for this interview, I'm 48, so I'm an old guy,
yep.
In the whole world. But I remember Karch Karai, back, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
it's interesting because when I put the notes together, I said, in the last 5 years. I'm like, no. I remember thinking about this, in the 90s, from that standpoint. And it's
absolutely.
It's amazing it really came in a relatively short amount of time from that standpoint. But now let's kind of come from another perspective. And we did talk about this, but the geographical location is important, in this discussion from my perspective. You know what I mean? Maybe not so much for yours, but
right.
What would you do if you were in my position? Say you got a head coaching job at the University of Minnesota, let's just say, for beach volleyball. Right. How would you develop out, or what would you start to tell the young people that, hey, this is something that's cool and you can have fun with, and you can play college sports?
Yeah, it would, depending on, this in part the boom, just like the indoor boom starting 10 years ago or so, is driven by the club and people willing to, part of it is to make a little bit more money. That's part of it, that clubs were willing to jump on with sort of Carrie and Misty being popular, that clubs started a little bit of sand, and then our coaches association realized that if there was going to be momentum there, then maybe they could carry that into college, and then it started to flip because college did it. Now clubs are doing it. Number one, in Minnesota and neighboring states, I guess, the juniors level is going to have to be involved. Minnesota has got plenty, if not the most, indoor Division I ready players in the country. At least the juniors region does. Yep. But to compete if at the level that University of Minnesota is paying their coach to compete, then you're not just going to be able to take indoor players and turn them into beach players in the moment that University of Minnesota will be able to sort of debut their program in 2 years. So the first thing I would have to do, or anybody's going to have to do up there, is just convince club coaches that there's going to be opportunity for people to play beach in college. Therefore, they should be able to train, maybe not specifically all of their or half their indoor players or the short indoor players or whatever, but there's going to be some direct correlation to how many beach-only players start to play club up in that area, if somebody can start it, and then allow them to get recruited to Minnesota or South Dakota State or even Division II, Minnesota Tatanka or whatever is up there. And I'm not sure that was the name, but
there is a Minnetonka, so I thought that was quite a good guess.
That's it. Yeah, I separated that too. So at the club level would be for the University of Minnesota head coach, they're going to have to spearhead and persuade the clubs up there to make some beach-only decisions or some sand-only decisions if it's indoor. I guess you would still call it beach, but
don't get smart with me. We still play outside.
Listen, we have courts on our campus, and I struggle to call them beach courts. They're still sand courts. So I think it's going to have to start for that region of the country at the juniors level, even though for now you could get 8 players to go to University of Minnesota that have only played indoor and probably still come and beat my beach only team or Louisiana Monroe's beach only team, or maybe only because there's just a physical aspect still in any college sport. Even though we're really good and Louisiana Monroe's really good at beach, there still might be an opportunity for really big schools to get the athlete that can come and do it, but maybe not compete against all the other big schools.
Yeah. See, this is and let's kind of segue into that particular thing, because when you talk about what are the gifts of a good beach volleyball player, and is it the same as indoor in your mind?
It's positionally sort of the same. I mean, outside hitters typically are translatable to the beach. I mean, there's 2/3 of the things that happen on the beach are what outside hitters do. The third component being setting. I guess if you were just playing side out 1, 2, 3, pass, set, attack, not blocking and digging and all those things, but if you were just to count those 3 touches as things that translate almost immediately, then outside hitters have 66% of that down. Setters have 33% of it down. Middles have 15% if you're going to scale down to what they attack inside, even though it's a hit, it's not the same. So there's a positional translation, particularly for outside hitters, but that's not to say that setters aren't good at passing. They just don't get that opportunity often, nor are to say that middles or liberos can't attack a higher ball or a different ball or bump set or whatever. But there is a very, very particular skill set. Once you reach the idea or the threshold of just being able to do it, like a good athlete can just come out and do it, whether they play middle or setter or libero or whatever. They're going to get the ball over the net. It's just the training and the experience that comes with understanding all of the touches and being able to do it well enough, and then put it into sort of an aggressive ability to win on the beach and not just get it over and be fired up about it. That's sort of what separates finally really good beach Division I athletes with just Division I athletes.
Well, the funny thing is that you kind of hinted towards this idea of specialization. I think one of the great things as an advantage of beach volleyball is it allows for players to get outside of that, if lack of a better word, compartmentalization. You know what I mean? Where you're at this, you're that you can literally become a volleyball player, rather than a libero or an outside hitter or whatever the situation might be.
Right. Well, and in a perfect world, if we're all trying to be holistic about it, that's true. But, if I were to stat how many times my middle had to bump set this past season, it might have been 3. And how many times she had to head to quick would have been 600. And so 600 to 3, it doesn't really say much for we're all say, hey, it's great to get your middle out there and she gets to become a better volleyball player. I would prefer that those 3 touches go wrong as opposed to her hitting quicks in spring practice and getting better at those, because that's unfortunately her specialization, and that's what's going to help indoor win. So that's a people don't like to look at the flip side because we're all sentimental about playing, just like I was a Karch Karai fan as well, and we're all a little sentimental about what beach can do for our indoor team, but I've come to find out that because I've had to do both, and the first 2 years I didn't have a beach only group, I had to have all the indoor players, no matter what position they were, play beach only. Yeah. We have to play 95% of the teams we have to play get to practice indoor all spring, and it's tough. I mean, it is really tough. You would think that it translated perfectly, and maybe some coaches are better at it, but it's not as one-to-one as we'd all like to think.
Exactly. Now, this leads to a good question, and the last question, for today is, if you were a young athlete, on the other end, from that perspective, and, you really like the game of beach, and now there's an opportunity, and maybe their local club, may or may not have some sort of beach program, what would they do?
Well, I think it's even though we've been doing it for 4 years, I still think it's in its infancy enough, and even for me, I get plenty of emails every day from kids who, even from Minnesota or from above the Mason-Dixon line, I guess, as we say in the South, but who have very, very limited beach experience. Like, they'll send me a video of them playing a co-ed tournament, on a grass court or something like that. And then they'll send me indoor footage of them jumping high and having a nice arm swing and passing real well, but they're only interested in possibly playing beach. And right now, in its infancy, I think that's enough. Like I said, once now that the NCAA is on board, and there might be there might be a rush for the bigger schools to come on board as well, that those girls, the ones that don't have access to beach courts, are going to have to be really special Division I indoor ready athletes to be able just to say, I can go and do it and learn on the fly starting in college, October 1st or whenever teams can get out there and start their developmental season. But I think right now it's worth the shot for kids out there that are interested in beach. There's still 50 schools that might have roster spots available, even for girls who don't play beach specific, even though there's some schools that are only taking those girls. We're not one of them. But, we've got 7 or 8 crossover kids still, and we'll always have that. We'll never be able to field an entire beach separate program. But and so for now, now's a great time to get in. In 2 years from now, you're going to have to be, I think, pretty special just to cross over from indoor and just start on the beach in college only.
Interesting. So that's an interesting. I think it's fun to give people a little perspective on numbers. Is that you do have a little bit of a future, going forward, and you don't have to be great tomorrow. You know what I mean? That you can sort of, get your thinking in this direction, because I think so many people, look at it as still, because it's funny because adults play it like all over. You know what I mean?
Right.
But at the younger levels, it's like, oh, we don't do that. Well, why?
Right.
But you play when you get old. It's funny to me. It's just
that's been indoor too. For it's the same thing. It's sort of driven by. Unfortunately, I think it's the cynical part of me still think it's driven a little bit by money, because a lot of girls get convinced that they need lessons and they need constant coaching and things like that, and that runs contrary to what you and I grew up doing. And so as adults, you don't seek out lessons, you don't seek out coaching, because you just want to play. But kids and parents believe that they've got to narrow that focus all the way down to an hour's worth at $75 an hour, and beach just doesn't. It's unfortunately going that way. That people are getting beach lessons for $75 an hour and things like that. But I think that flip just happens in adulthood, where, for now at least, that it's a little bit looser. It's easy to go out and enjoy it, but for parents, they want their kids to get a scholarship, and they want everything, sort of straightforward. And so it's really hard just to let 4 girls go out and play doubles, because there's an opportunity to make money. People see 4 girls playing, and they think, I'm going to tell all of them they need lessons and they need to get in this club, and then it's just such an easy way to convince people to do it.
It is an interesting discussion, maybe at a future date, to bring out the idea of the love of the game and just playing versus a very structured approach, which I would actually argue and as one that does give individual lessons, and does do this, that somewhere along the line, it has to be blurred because there's so many people, and I can tell you the number of times that people have called me up and said, I want my daughter to make the team, in 2 weeks, and can you fix her? And you're like, well, sure, I give her some information, but my chances are pretty slim. And, and that's the thing it comes down to, and it really is, I debate and fight with it all the time, and I try to tell the people I work with, I said, first of all, I hate that this relationship has money involved, and I'm going to try my best to make it deeper than that. But it is something that I invest time and effort in, and it really is a catch-22. So, but
I agree. I'm glad that you admitted that out loud. That makes me respect you even more because a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people are unwilling to do that.
Yeah, and it's such a and the thing that's interesting about it is that and this is another sideline subject, but I have a son that actually is playing college basketball, D3, down in Indiana. Was a very heady player, not the most athletic, but athletic enough. Didn't jump the highest, but jumped well enough. And he's down there playing college basketball, and he's having a good time with it. And that's something that I don't think kids get enough perspective is, well, if I'm not the top 150 and I've had 42 different JO programs and I won the national championship 7 times over, that I'm not good enough. You know what I mean?
Right.
When there's a tremendous amount of players that could be really, really great players and enjoy the game for much longer than just be retiring at age 18.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and it's funny because I always make fun of some of the athletes I work with. I said, are you retiring yet? And they're like, well, I'm only 18. I said, well, essentially you are. You played for 9 years. I think that's time for
that might be my coaching. It's on my coaching headstone. Yeah, he tried hard for 9 years and then he got fired. That might be my thing too. I'll say retired. Everyone else will say fired.
Yeah, it's a mutual agreement to quit. So anyways, any last thoughts? I know we've got a little over the time, but any last thoughts, things that you would share with young people as far as to understand?
No, I think to dovetail on exactly what you just said, that the opportunities are only becoming more widespread, and my example is that our beach team, we made it to the conference championship, and I wasn't able to see one single kid play ahead of time. I haven't been to one beach tournament in my college coaching career, and they all reached out to me, and they knew specifically what they wanted academically, and they created the opportunity through perseverance, through some diligence by their parents, through a little bit of effort to get out here and visit this amazing place. And I would say that to all girls, that there's no reason not to reach out and try, because my beach team is a testament to exactly that. And so I would advise everyone to make sure they reach out to the people that they're interested in, because you don't know.
Cool. And where would people get a hold of you? Because I think that's important just to kind of put out there. If somebody does want to get a hold of your university and yourself personally, where do they go?
Yeah, they can go to our website. It's mercerbears.com, and or they can go to our university website to check out just how amazing this place is, and that's mercer.edu. And they can get a hold of me at elder_dd@mercer.edu.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for the time. I look forward to the next conversation.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.